So we're going to get started. Let everybody stay on time. So good morning. My name is Victoria. I'm one of the estate planning attorneys with the Kopenberger Law Firm. I am joined by Ms. Kathy Waddell from Operation Freedom Paws, who you're going to get to hear from in a bit. The first part of today is going to go more into the estate planning side. And for our veterans, really looking at what do you need to make sure you have in place to be fully protected, whether you have benefits already, are taking advantage of those, or you don't have the benefits at all. Going to go through a relatively large amount of information in a pretty short amount of time. The great news is for those of you who are attending for the Kopenberger side, you're entitled to a free consultation. So if you just even have more questions after this, we are happy to meet with you. And then this also gives you an opportunity to get Kathy's information if you have any further questions on her organization. To give a little bit of introduction to the Kopenberger Law Firm, I want to start by going over some of our attorneys. So we are one of the largest estate planning groups in California, if not at this point, the country. We have not only a large number of attorneys that we have here serving our clients, but we also have numerous departments. So not only do we focus on estate planning and protecting people and making sure the plan is in place while they're alive, we also have an estate administration department. At some point, we all pass away, and it's incredibly important to make sure after that happens, your family or whoever's in charge has a resource and a place to go to answer questions they have, and in a lot of cases, actually do a lot of the work that comes up after someone passes. We also have a business and tax department. So if you have additional tax questions, if you have your own business and you need help either establishing a new one or making sure that your current one is compliant, that is where we turn to our business and tax department. And then we absolutely want to make sure as many people as possible can stay out of court, either during their lives or after they pass away, that the family is not stuck in court. But we unfortunately know that sometimes court is inevitable for one reason or another. Sometimes it's the family, sometimes it's things out of our control. So we do have an estate litigation department that is also there to make sure that your family or you have someone to, again, walk alongside you. But we could not do what we do without our incredible staff. So we have a very large staff that is there to make sure your questions are answered in a timely manner and that we are able to serve people all across the state of California. We actually have numerous offices all throughout the state. So we have 8 permanent locations at this point in the state of California. We do help clients, though, that have even moved out of the state via Zoom and even the phone. So let's get started. So we at Kopenberger 100% appreciate our veterans. You have been serving our country in one capacity or another, and we want to make sure that in turn you are served now that you are in the veteran category. It's one of those things that unfortunately a lot of veterans don't end up getting taught about what they need, the benefits that they have access to, and they really don't get help making sure that those benefits are really maximized. So we want to make sure that we can do our part to help along that process. There's a lot of pieces with veterans benefits that need protection. And so today for the estate planning side of things, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can help protect your benefits or ensure that if you have children that are veterans, that their benefits are protected if they receive an inheritance from you after you are gone. So first and foremost, for every single person, veteran or otherwise, if you are over the age of 18, you need at least 2 of these documents on the screen, but generally speaking, 3 or 4 of them. The reason for that is we want to make sure that, again, you are completely protected, whether you're alive and well, alive and incapacitated, or even after you have passed away. The first document to make sure that you have in place is your Advanced Healthcare Directive. Every single person over the age of 18 needs one, because if you are unable to verbally tell your doctor or physician who is able to make your medical decisions and what those decisions would be, it has to be in writing. This is extremely important because if you're no longer able to verbally communicate, you're in an extremely vulnerable position in most cases. And so having in writing who can authorize procedures, who can even make those end-of-life decisions, is one of those things you don't want to leave to chance. You don't want to leave this up to somebody who you may not actually want to be able to come in and make those choices. Now, for our veterans, in some cases, the VA has a specific healthcare directive that they have on file for you. But if you're ever taken to another hospital, or if you don't have one through the VA, you need to get a separate healthcare directive done. Again, this allows you to put in place who will be an advocate for you when you no longer can advocate for yourself. So this is, if you have nothing else in your wheelhouse of estate planning documents, this is the one to have. If you have any questions on that, or if you're ready to get started, come and see us as soon as you're able. The other thing is, if you already have one in place, make sure it is up to date. That means two things, actually three. One is it has to have been done since 2004. If it was done before 2004, it is no longer valid. So you need to make sure you have one that is current. You also need to make sure that whoever you originally named is still the correct person or people. If they have moved, if they are unfortunately no longer with us, if they are physically or mentally no longer capable, maybe your relationship has changed. Again, you want to make sure you have the right person in place. And finally, in our healthcare directives, we have our clients make some of the decisions ahead of time. That includes organ donation and life support. It is important to make sure that those decisions are still up to date. So again, as life changes, as your maybe values and morals and even religion change, those decisions can change. So it's important to have that reviewed. We recommend every 3 to 5 years, just to make sure it's still current and that you will still be protected when or if the time comes. The next document you need is a durable or financial power of attorney. This is the document that will give somebody else the authority to act on your behalf when it comes to your finances. It is also the document that allows people to sign contracts on your behalf and, really importantly, ensure that your benefits remain in place. This can be for veterans benefits, and this can be for other government benefits. If you are on benefits that have any kind of a renewal process where they need forms refilled out, that you need to requalify, renew that benefit, you need to make sure that if you are incapacitated, that somebody else has the authority to do that on your behalf. Otherwise, there can be significant issues in maintaining these benefits. Again, that can be not only for veterans, but this can be other people that are on any kind of disability benefits as well. So as I mentioned, if you're incapacitated and those benefits are reevaluated, you need to have someone who has that authority to sign those contracts and negotiate on your behalf. But you also need someone who can manage your money. So if you have a pension, if you have your checking accounts, you have a home, you have things that continue on, even if you're incapacitated, it's important to make sure that you have someone in place who can make sure the wheels keep turning, that everything runs smoothly, and that your needs are provided for financially. Without these documents, there can unfortunately be some catastrophic results. Not only can you be in a position where you are unprotected, if you don't have those documents, it also puts you and us then in the position of having to go to court to ask the court to appoint who would take care of you and who has the authority to manage your finances. Essentially, then what happens is you've lost the control. You no longer, because you're incapacitated, you no longer have a say in who that person is going to be. Now, the court and whoever your attorney is will try their best to capture who we think you would want in place. A lot of times it's a family member who comes forward and they're the spouse or the child of the parent, and they're saying, mom or dad or my husband or wife is now in a position they can't advocate for themselves. We don't have the right documents. We need to go to court. But in some cases, even if it's your own child and even if it's your own spouse, you may not have wanted them to be in that position of authority. And so again, by having those documents in place ahead of time, you ensure that you have the right advocate if or when the time becomes necessary. Next up, you absolutely, if you're a veteran or not, this doesn't matter. You will either need a will or a trust. The reason for this is, again, at some point we all pass away. And when that happens, we need to have in writing what happens with any resource that we had. That could be $1,000, that can be $1 million, it's any value. We need to make sure, though, again, you've put in writing where is that going to go and when. You need a will if you do not own property or you have less than $184,000. So a will is going to be appropriate protection if you qualify under both of those categories. The issue, though, is that if you do own property, or you have more than that $184,000, a will is not going to be enough to protect you or, frankly, to protect your estate. The reason, again, is unfortunately court. If you pass away with a piece of property or more than that $184,000 and all you had was a will, unfortunately, then after you pass away, the court says you didn't adequately answer questions that they have. And so they then have to pull your estate through court and answer them for you. Again, taking the control not only out of your hands, but also out of your family's. Court is an extremely, whether it's a conservatorship or probate or any type of court is time consuming and it absolutely is cost consuming. It not only can take for probate anywhere from 2 to 5 years to settle an estate, it also then costs 5 to 7% of the gross estate. What that means is if your home is worth $1 million, the court does not care what equity you have in that property. They care what can it be sold for. And that is then what that percentage is based off of. So it absolutely eats into the estate. It depletes what will ultimately go to beneficiaries. And again, it is very time consuming and emotionally taxing in most cases. So again, if you can avoid court, we absolutely encourage you and your family to do this. And the great news is that you can. So what we talk with 99.9% of people about is you probably need a living trust. The reason is that a trust is there to answer all of the questions that the court says a will does not. So it answers who's going to take over when you no longer can and what powers do they have? Are they able to invest the money? Are they able to sell a property? What control or power do they have if you can no longer make those decisions? It also ultimately says who's going to inherit, what they're going to inherit, and when they're going to inherit. So these are all questions that you have the control over, and whether you're alive or not, it ensures your wishes then are going to be the ones carried out after you are gone, not the courts, not your family's, yours. And so having that control in place, having that protection there is extremely valuable, not only for you, but frankly also for the family. It takes a lot of the question out of their minds. It takes a lot of the worry and even sometimes the guilt away from them. Another big thing is that it protects your privacy. So anytime, unfortunately, something has to go to court, I should say in most cases, it becomes a matter of public proceeding. What that means is if anybody was curious about who your family is, how much money is in the estate, things that for most people we want to keep private, those things become public. So having a trust allows only the people you want to see the trust in your estate to see it, not anybody else. Again, though, it makes sure that your wishes are ultimately the ones carried out. We very much value making sure our clients, our veterans, have control, again, even after you are gone. It's your estate, it is your legacy. What do you want that to look like after you're gone, and who do you want to then carry that out for you? Now, the one other piece, though, is even if you have a trust, you also have a will. The reason for that is that your trust has to have title to certain assets before you pass away. So what that means is after a trust is established, we take care of recording deeds for California properties to ensure that your properties are protected from the court. We will advise you to put your accounts such as checking accounts, savings accounts, and non-retirement investment accounts into the trust. We also advise you on what to do with if there's any death benefits that you may have, either through the VA, through a regular pension, retirement, things of that nature. Should those go through the trust or should they go somewhere else? We walk you through all of that. But for the assets that need to be in the trust, if you choose not to or forget to put something in the trust and then you pass away, we have a pour over will that says, okay, ordinarily, that asset would have been subject to the court in full, but instead we get to tell the court, no, give everything back to the trust and administer it according to that person's wishes. So it's basically there is a safety net for your assets, and again, ensures that everything ultimately goes how you would have wanted. Now, the other part that we talk about is the emotional stuff. This is the non-asset focused pieces. This isn't the money. This is about what you want done to you and your body after you've passed away. Where do you want your personal items to go? How are people supposed to access important documents? So on this, especially focusing on benefits, what information do your people or your person, what information do they need in order to make sure, especially if there's any kind of death benefit or something that can transfer to them after you're gone, what do they need in order to accomplish that? Do they have the authority necessary? Do they have the information necessary? Because if they don't, that can throw up a lot of red tape that can be very frustrating and hard to get through. The other thing is your personal effects. We had a client a couple years ago, and after his father died, his father had served in the military. The one thing that he really wanted, he and his brother wanted, were his father's flags that he had acquired and the different medals and things that he had had during his time of service. Unfortunately, that father, when he passed, had a new wife who was very unwilling to work with his sons to give them those items. And it was extremely heartbreaking and very, very devastating for them to realize there was a chance they would not get these items. One of the ways we combat that and put in our trust a power that allows that situation to not occur is you have the ability to give personal items to whomever you would want simply by using a handwritten letter. This handwritten letter allows you to say what an item is and then who you want it to go to. So what that means is in that situation, if the father had wanted his new wife to have the house and the cash, that's fine. That could have been written in the trust. But he could have used a separate letter that said, but these specific items related to my service, related to the military, that are emotional for my children, those items will go to them. And that would have meant when he passed, there would have been no question that they would have received those items. So especially for the things that, again, carry that emotional weight or even some history, some family value, using those letters can help not only, again, ensure your wishes are carried out on where you want those items to go, but it can have profound impacts emotionally on the family after you are gone and take out some of the fighting that occurs over the stuff. So if you have any questions on those items, what is included in those letters, how to write one, absolutely take the time to reach out to us. We are happy to instruct you on that. So next up, how to protect an inheritance, whether for you or your child. So one of the biggest issues when it comes to benefits is you can be at risk of losing them if all of a sudden there is a large influx in an inheritance, cash, or other assets. So when we're looking at you, are you in a position where you are on any kind of government or VA benefit where there is a risk that when you receive an inheritance, you could then be disqualified from those benefits? If the answer is yes, there's even a risk, we need to then talk about advanced planning to protect that inheritance so that you can still receive it, but you are not then going to lose your benefits. The other thing is, do you have a child who's a veteran? A lot of our clients do at this point. We have a lot of military families in our clientele. And so then one of the things that is a big concern is when I pass away and leave my child an inheritance, I don't want them to lose any benefits they could be entitled to, whether it's now or even in the future, because you never know what can happen down the road. Utilizing special needs trusts allows you to still leave an inheritance, but again, protect those benefits. Essentially, the inheritance then is able to supplement any benefits that they may be on, rather than replacing and taking away those benefits. So if you have any questions on that, again, take advantage of the free consultation we're offering at the end of this webinar to ask those questions. Again, special needs planning is something that is not often talked about, but can have profound and fantastic impacts on the ability for a family to, again, leave an inheritance without risking any government benefits or programs that they may be on. The other issue is, if you have documents in place and you have named your children, are they in the military? The reason this can be a concern is, where is your child physically located? Are they literally in an area where they're in the same time zone, or at least within a couple hours of the same time zone? If they're on the opposite side of the world and you have an emergency and need to make a quick call, are they truly going to be able to pick up the phone and talk to a doctor? Are they going to be able to pay that bill? Are they even able to talk to you? In some cases, as any of our veterans I'm sure know, If you are in the military, there will be times you are completely out of communication. So when you're looking at your own documents, as far as who is going to advocate for you, a lot of times people do name their children. But what again happens if your child is not physically able to be there for you, even on the phone? So this is again where it's time then to look at your documents and see, do you need at least a backup in case that situation occurs? That way, again, it ensures that you remain protected no matter what happens. Again, what if they're overseas and unavailable for extended periods of time? A lot of the times the tours are not quick. And again, a lot of times, unfortunately, they are not just available at any given moment to pick up the phone if there is an emergency. So truly, if that is you, if that is a situation you or someone you know is in, come and talk to us so that we can make sure we are making sure that you are still completely adequately protected. All right, so that's a little bit on the estate planning side. Again, I can't emphasize enough, please take advantage of the free consultation. There is more information that becomes very case by case specific. We want to make sure that you and your family are protected as much as we can. I'm now going to turn it over to Kathy so that she can introduce herself and Operation Freedom Paws.
Thank you, Victoria. My name is Kathy Waddell, and I work at an organization called Operation Freedom Paws. We're located in San Martin, California. We provide service dogs for veterans free of charge. I'm also a trauma recovery specialist there. We provide therapy. We provide assistance in any way the veteran or their family needs. Next slide, please. So I've had a couple service dogs I put up here. These are my two service dogs. My current service dog is Crystal on the left. She's a diabetic alert dog. And that's a picture of her watching me while I'm getting a procedure in the hospital, so you could tell how focused she is on me. The other dog on the right is my first service dog, who's passed now, named Bergen, and he was a multiple sclerosis assistance dog. And I put him in his tuxedo because that's what he came home with. And so it just kind of shows you they do get to have a little bit of fun. They're not working all the time. So next slide, please. So there's a lot of confusion with people have about what's a service dog versus a therapy dog versus emotional support animal. And it gets really confusing out there. So before I talk about what the service dogs can do for veterans, I'd like to talk a little bit about the three different types. So the first type is therapy dogs. And therapy dogs are dogs who are outwardly focused on everybody in the room, and they're kind of scoping out everybody, and their job is to interact with everybody in the room. They may be used in a hospital, a court setting to comfort people, and they can kind of look around and figure out who wants to be petted, who wants to be near them. And so those dogs are outwardly focused. So next slide, please. So therapy dogs can also be called facility dogs. So there's dogs that live like in an assisted living facility. My mom is in an assisted living facility in San Diego, and there is a therapy dog there named Zeus who lives there, and he's shared by all the residents. And so he spends time comforting them, playing with them. They take them for walks. They go on the little trips they take together and things like that. But they're still just the level of a therapy dog. So a therapy dog is outwardly focused on their entire environment. They can be any age, breed, or size. They have to have the right temperament and personality, of course, to do that kind of work. And so normally, to get your dog to be a therapy dog, they would have a certification as a canine good citizen through the AKC. So next slide, please. So I'm kind of taking these in order of how much legal rights the dog has. So the therapy facility dogs have the least amount of rights. So therapy and facility dogs do not have rights to go out in public anywhere like a service dog will. They're only allowed to go to where they're working. So if they're working in a hospital, they're allowed to go to the hospital. They don't have a right to go out to restaurants, movie theaters, and every place like that. So they also don't have any special rights on airlines or any special housing rights. Also, other species can be used as therapy animals. There's a picture in the bottom there of a miniature horse going into a nursing home. So they can be any species of bird, cats, guinea pigs, llamas, horses, can all be used as therapy dogs or facility dogs. Okay, next slide, please. So the next level up that you might hear about is emotional support animals. So emotional support animals comfort people who have some type of emotional problem, whether it's anxiety, depression, and they serve as kind of a comfort alongside that person. But they don't do anything to really change the depression or the anxiety. They're just a comfort. And um, so they have housing rights. So if you have an emotional support animal and your lease on your apartment says you cannot have a dog here, but you have a letter from a psychiatrist that says you need an emotional support animal, then they have to allow you to have your emotional support animal with you in your housing. They used to have airline rights. That's kind of not right on this particular slide. Excuse me here, I'm sorry. So um, they used to have airline rights, but they don't anymore. They just have housing rights only. They don't have public access rights. So this is where it gets confusing for people. People think, oh, I can take my dogs in ESA. I can take him into the restaurant. No, you can't. The only dogs that can go in public like that are service dogs. So I like to point this out because there's a lot of confusion out there and it kind of needs to be cleared up. So when I say emotional support animal, there is another service dog I'll talk about in a little bit called a psychiatric service animal, which is a service dog. And I'll talk about the difference between that. So next slide, please. So what is a service dog? So a service dog was defined in Title II and III of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. So a service animal is a dog that is individually trained to perform a task for a benefit of an individual with a disability. So a service dog works to mitigate that disability. They're not like an emotional support animal that just is a comfort alongside you. They have a specific task they do that changes the course of your disability and helps you with your life. And it can be physical, like a walking assistance. It can be sensory, like guide dogs for the blind. It can be a psychiatric service dog that we do a lot of PTSD dogs for our veterans. It can be a mental disability, traumatic brain injury, things like that. The only other animal that's allowed to be a service animal is a miniature horse. It used to be, it could be any type of animal, and we ran into problems on the airlines because people were bringing in peacocks and lizards and snakes as their service animal, and it caused a lot of trouble. So the law was changed. Only these two animals, dogs or miniature horses. That's all. Next slide, please. So this is my service dog, Crystal, in the bottom there. Remember, I told you that's her watching me at the hospital. And you can tell in that picture on the bottom right, she's very focused on one person. That's me. Up in the left-hand corner, there's another service dog that's actually putting the card into the ATM. That's a task they could do for someone maybe in a wheelchair that's not, it doesn't have mobility to do that. So they can pay cashiers, they can bring the bag back to the person. So they're doing tasks that mitigate disability, that actually do something, and they have to be trained to do these tasks. So Crystal is my diabetic alert dog. So she's, the way I like to explain it is she's always on the phone with me. She's constantly monitoring my blood sugar. So if I go up too high, 180, or if I start going to 80, she's trained to smell that. She can smell it before I do. She can smell the change in my body chemistry, and she'll alert me. She'll paw me. Hey, mom, you're going low. You got to eat something. Or she'll paw me. You know, you're high. You got to do some exercise, take some medication, whatever. So So she's actually mitigating me, preventing me having low blood sugar. If I'm asleep and I'm going low and I'm not awake, that's dangerous. So she'll jump on me, she'll roll against me, she'll lick me until I wake up. Next slide, please. So this is just one thing we run across in public a lot too. I like to clear up is, can I pet a service dog? And the answer is maybe. If you see a service dog that has a vest that says service dog in training, we ask that you do not pet that dog, because that dog is learning to focus on that one person, and they're going through a training, probably from, it depends on the type of organization, but when, say, after from a small puppy up to like a year and a half years old, they're learning that focus. So we ask that you don't pet those. Now, anyone else that has a service dog, you can always ask. I wouldn't recommend asking a guide dog for the blind if someone's walking along and the dog is guiding them. I don't recommend you ask them, but anybody else you can ask. So it depends what the dog is doing. My dog's a diabetic alert dog, so I can usually say yes. So I will ask the dog to sit, then I will ask you to let them smell your hand first. If that goes okay, then you can go ahead and pet their ears and pet them all over. So what you don't want to ever do is don't approach a dog from the back. Don't approach them and put your hand right up to their face. I mean, just like us, we wouldn't like someone coming up and putting their hand in our face. So that could be stimulating to them and it's not comfortable. So you want to make sure the dog's comfortable. Now, these dogs are highly trained. So you're probably thinking, well, they wouldn't bite. No, but any dog could always go back to an original instinct. If there's a smell they're used to when they were young, or something scared them when they were young. So no matter how well trained they are, they could go back to that instinct. So we're always watching them to make sure. I mean, service dogs are so well trained they don't bite, but we're always monitoring them, because you do get the child in the store that runs up and grabs them on the back and things like that happen. So yes, you can, but always ask first. Next slide, please. So now, service dogs, like I was talking about, have the highest amount of legal access rights. They can go to all public places. Crystal goes everywhere with me, to the store, to the movies, to the doctor's office, everywhere. Restaurants, but they're highly trained in a restaurant to be under the table. They don't eat food off the floor. They don't sit next to you on the seat and eat off your plate. That is bad etiquette. They're highly trained to go under the table and stay there. You shouldn't even know the dog's in the restaurant. So they can go any public place or building. What's interesting about this is a federal law under the ADA, but the only people that are exempt are federal agencies. So technically courthouses and the post office and things like that technically don't have to follow it, but they do. So, so service dogs have public access, housing, and airline rights. So they have all three, and they're the only category that does. So service dogs have a right to fly in the cabin under the Air Carrier Access Act. Now, I mentioned before, we've had a lot of problems with dogs biting flight attendants, ripping the seats up because people came on and said their dog was a service dog and it was not a service dog because it was not behaving appropriately. It obviously was not trained. So they've tightened up the rules now, and you have to fill out a Department of Transportation form before you fly that signs everything away under the penalty of perjury that your dog has all this training. Where was it trained? Contact, so they can check that it's legit. All of the shots, everything has to be filled out every time. So so that I think has helped cut down a little bit on problems with the service dogs flying. So in the bottom right-hand corner is a picture of Crystal with me on the plane. And I fly on Southwest, they put you in the bulkhead seat. They let you get on first. You don't have to pay extra money for a service dog anywhere. They're not allowed to charge you. So you can see she's down there between my feet, not taking up anybody else's space. So that's how you fly with a service dog. Next slide, please. So, like I said, service dogs are allowed in any housing, and regardless of the breed or pet size. So we use all breeds in our program. We have small dogs, we have Great Pyrenees, we have everything in between. So any dog that has the correct temperament and the right training can be a service dog. It's not limited to just Labradors and Golden Retrievers. And so any housing you're in, you have a right to, under the Fair Housing Act, to have that dog with you, or your miniature horse if you have one. But that right and responsibility comes with a lot of responsibility on my part. So my dog always has to be under my control. It cannot be disruptive in any environment that I go to. So my dog cannot go into a store and be barking and growling and jumping at people. If a service dog barks once, that could be their alerting, and then that'll stop. Or if the dog barks not alerting, but they're not behaving correctly, the handler would be able to say stop, and the dog would stop and would not continue to do that. If the dog continues to do that, then it's my responsibility as a handler to take her out of that environment. We do not have a right to be in there unless our dogs are behaving appropriately. Or the business then has a right to ask us to leave, just as the business has a right to ask a person's dog is not a service dog to leave if they're not a service dog. So it's difficult for businesses, but here's the two questions. There's only two questions they can ask legally, and they should do this. One question is it a service dog? Yes or no? Number two, what tasks does it perform? So I don't have to give away my disability. I could say she alerts me to changes in my medical condition so I can appropriately respond. I usually just say she's a diabetic alert dog. Okay, if they can't answer those two questions correctly, then the business has a right to ask them to leave. Or if the dog is behaving inappropriately, the business has a right to ask them to leave. So here's what I tell businesses because they're afraid of being sued. I tell them, get a police report. If you have to ask a dog to leave, then you have a legal document to protect you if someone tries to sue you. Okay, next slide, please. So there's a lot of types of service dogs, and they're growing every day. We're learning more and more things service dogs can do, and it's really easy to train a service dog. It's very hard to train the handler to listen to the service dog. That's what we run into. So in the bottom hand corner, there's a man where the dog's doing what we call a snuggle, where the dog will jump up. It's a comforting thing, jump up, put their paws on the shoulders and kiss each cheek. It's something we do for people in wheelchairs. So everybody's heard about guide dogs for the blind. And those are service dogs. Those were the first service dogs. And then as time went on, we began to realize dogs could help people with more than that, mobility and things like that. So it kind of grew from there. And so we use dogs for physical support tasks. Dogs can pull wheelchairs. They can open doors. They can hit the handicap button to open the door. You can put a rope on your door, have the dog open it. They can turn off light switches on and off. They can get a bottle of water out of the fridge. They can hand cash to a cashier, like I said before. They can unzip your jackets. They can take off your socks. Depending on what the person needs, the service dog is tailored to that individual. We have a person in our program with a life-threatening peanut allergy, and she has an allergy alert dog, peanut allergy alert dog. And if anybody around her has had peanuts within the last 24 hours, he will turn her away from those people. So he can smell that on them and make sure she never gets near any peanuts, because one little fraction of a peanut can put her into anaphylactic shock. Seizure alert dogs. We do a lot of seizure alert dogs. They can smell the changes in our body chemistry about 15, 20 minutes before the seizure, which we're not going to know. Then that person, depending on the type of seizure, can do what they need to do to take care of themselves. Maybe have the dog bring their medicine. Maybe they need to call 911. Maybe they need to get a bunch of pillows around them to be safe. Whatever it is for that person. Then when the seizure happens, we do something called deep pressure therapy. So the dog will lay across their stomach during the seizure, which reduces the duration of the seizure and the intensity and provides a lot of comfort for the person. The dog can also clean out the mouth of the person to help avoid choking and comfort them. Next slide, please. We have hearing dogs that alert people to the sounds in their environment. Not only, a lot of people think of this at hearing the doorbell for someone that's hearing impaired, but they also use their hearing dogs out in public as well. We have dogs for autism, depending where people are on the spectrum. We do have some people in our program that do dogs for autism. We do mobility dogs for diseases like MS and Parkinson's disease. In Parkinson's disease, a lot of times people will get a gait freeze and they can't walk again. So the dog will get them to take that next step and get them walking again. So then they can go to the mall independently. Now, here's the big part I wanted to talk about for veterans, psychiatric service dogs. So before I mentioned emotional support animals that just comfort people with a mental disability, for a veteran with PTSD, their dogs are psychiatric service dogs. Why? Because they do something to interrupt the things that the veteran with PTSD experiences, such as hypervigilance when they're out in their environment, nightmares, anxiety. The dog will, having a nightmare, the dog will interrupt the nightmare, interrupt the anxiety, break the cycle, bring the person back into the present moment. Because when they're having a flashback, that part of the brain that causes that doesn't know time. So if they're having a flashback to something in the war, they're there as far as their body and everything knows. So the dog, we have special exercises we do that teach them to learn how to work with the dog to help them get back into the present. And it also provides help for their hypervigilance when they're out in public, to kind of looking out for things that might be a problem for the veteran. Like if there's a big crowd over there, they know that's going to be too much for their handler. They'll actually guide the person away from that crowd. They'll put space between them in the grocery store and the person in front of them or behind them. All those things are very important to our veterans. So diabetic alert dogs, I already talked about that. That's the kind of dog I have. In our program, we also do civilians. So that's why I'm mentioning all this. We do veterans is about 70% of our work. We also do about 30% civilians. So on the bottom right, there's a handle that's on the top of the picture, and that we use sometimes for people that have mobility issues that need something to hold on to. So sometimes we'll use that type of a handle. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go into a little bit more about the specific tasks that service dogs could do for PTSD and physical injuries. And the reason I have physical injuries here is a lot of our veterans do have both a war injury or a traumatic brain injury, in addition to having PTSD. So the dog becomes like their battle buddy, and it becomes a person that's there for them, that's got their back, so that they can kind of learn how to relax a little bit and let the dog take over. Look, I'm going to tell you if there's something in your environment you have to worry about. So it allows them to kind of let go a little bit and be more confident about being out in public. A lot of our clients, when they first come to us, they're not comfortable in being home. They've been locked up for 10 years. There's too much stimulus out there. There's too much hypervigilance that goes on. They're looking around at everything, and it just becomes too much, so they don't go out. So we bring them in and slowly teach them how to train their dog and bring them out in public again to a new normal. The dog also alerts the client to their hypervigilant before it escalates. If they see them start to dissociate, or they're going into high anxiety about something, the dog will sense that before, and maybe sit down with them, have them take a break, do some deep breathing exercises before it escalates. So there's another example of a service dog that's actually mitigating a disability. They interrupt nightmares and flashbacks, so they can decrease the intensity of the nightmare that the veterans suffer and help them recover quicker. And they have that buddy with them, so they can contact the dog. If they're in the middle of a flashback, they can reach out, touch the dog, and that grounds them back into the present moment. I talked about before, it provides space between them and other people, like in grocery lines, when they need space between them because it's too triggering for them to be too close to people. They can retrieve items for someone might be in a wheelchair off the floor. If you drop your cell phone, pick it up, bring it back. They can bring you your medicine. They can help pull your wheelchair. They can carry items for you. And one of the best things is the dog provides an icebreaker in public for people that maybe be not used to being out in public and relating socially. So people will come up and say, hey, can I pet your dog? And so it kind of brings them out of themselves a little bit and loosens them up a little bit. And they meet more people. Not to mention it provides a constant companion that provides unconditional love for you 24/7. And we also have a lot of fun with our dogs as well. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to mention, like I've talked about before, another legal thing is it's illegal to represent a pet as a service dog in public. And you guys have probably seen this. Dogs in shopping carts. A service dog does not belong in a shopping cart. They should be on the floor, on a leash, under control, and being walked next to their handler. If a dog's in a shopping cart, it's not a service dog at that moment. It's not behaving appropriately. So people are sneaking dogs into stores. I'm sure you've seen it. And that's not okay. And that's a situation where business can ask them to leave. So there are fines for this. I'm not sure the very latest, but it's something like $5,000 fine, and there's some jail time associated with it if you really get convicted of this, which doesn't happen too much. But it's just good to know that it would really help the real service dogs if people wouldn't do this, because it makes it hard for the real ones. Okay, next slide, please. So there's two types of service dog organizations out there. One I call traditional. And that's where you apply to the service dog organization. They get to know you and they put you on a waiting list, and then they breed dogs. They raise the dogs. So puppy raisers take them over around 2 months or so, up to like a year and a half. And they train them basic obedience. Then they bring them back to that organization and they train them in the specific skills they need for the person. So next slide, please. So then when the organization feels, okay, we've got a good match for Kathy, for example, then they'll call me and say, hey, we think we got a dog for you. Can you come for 2 weeks training? So you go for 2-week training and you learn what the dog knows. And then they make sure it's a match, and then you go home and you have your dog. And usually you return in a year or so for a recheck and things like that. And the cost I have here can range from $0 to $60,000. Nobody has to pay $60,000 for a service dog. Those numbers at that end of the range are scammers. Almost 100% of the time, they will take money. A lot of times they'll say, hey, give me, 15,000, I'll get you a dog. There's many organizations out there that are scammers, and they don't even give the person a dog. So before you go to some kind of an agency like that, check with somebody who knows. I know a few good ones that do this model. Canine Companions for Independence is a good service dog organization. Bergen University is a good service dog organization. There's no charge for Canine Companions for Independence. There is a minimal charge for Bergen University, but it may be a few $1,000s. It's not going to be $10,000 or more. So that's something to be aware of. there's a lot of them out there because they've jumped on the bandwagon with service dogs, and there's a lot of problems out there right now as well. So, but you should be able to get your service dog for free. Next slide, please. So my organization is non-traditional service dog organization. And what I mean by that is we do a different model. We do not breed dogs. We get our dogs from shelters and rescue groups. We have an agreement with Guide Dogs of the Blind in Guide Dogs of the Desert, excuse me, in Palm Springs. A lot of times a dog that's being trained to guide the blind they need the most concentration and training of any of the service dogs. And a lot of times there'll be a dog that'll be really close, almost, but they have this one little thing they can't get over, but they'd be a great service dog. So they've had the 2-year training. And so we take their dropouts from CNI dogs and we make them into service dogs in our organization. So we do not breed dogs. There's plenty of dogs in shelters and rescue groups that need homes. So we go out, we get a dog, we bring a client into the program. And what's different about us is we have you come down to our canine education center in San Martin for 1 year. And we ask you to come 2 times a week, and we train you to train your own dog. And that helps our veterans get out of the house and begin to build social relationships again. And we help them with their families. If they're having problems, we help the children. We help people financially. We provide everything that they need. And so that is what our program does. And so I'd be happy to take any questions, or if there's any questions in the chat or anything. But that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, as she mentioned, if you do have any questions, either put them in the chat or Q&A now, or both Kathy and our information will be available. Kathy's is already in the chat if you would like to take that down. But thank you, Kathy. It's absolutely wonderful getting to hear more about the organization and what you guys do, and frankly, the education on the different levels of dogs and frankly, what people should or should not do around service dogs or with their own. So there we go. So we are wrapping up this webinar. Thank you again for attending. On the Kopenberger side, again, really quickly, we really, again, want to make sure when you're talking about an estate plan, talking about a legacy, talking about what you even need now during life, we want to make sure that we're going through what actually matters the most to you. What do you want your, again, legacy to look like? Some of how we do that is, of course, setting up an estate plan. And so with that being said, for our veterans, we are giving a 10% discount now until the end of the year for any work that is done. So again, I encourage you to take advantage not only of the free consultation, but if you're ready to either get an estate plan started or you need to update your current one, absolutely take advantage then of that 10% discount. Just let them know that you attended this webinar and that you're a veteran, and we will make sure that applies. But the other piece is at Kopenberger, we work with other professionals and other people in the community to make sure we have an entire network of people who can help make sure your needs are met. We understand that estate planning is not the only thing people end up needing help with. But a lot of times the problem is, where do you even start? If you're a veteran who's looking for how to apply for benefits, what are some of the benefits you can even have available to you? How do you get a service dog if you need it? This is why we want to make sure we do these webinars with other professionals, with other people, to make sure you have that education and have that knowledge. As far as why Kopenberger, so we have been around since 1979. And again, everything we do here is customized from the estate planning side. But truly, because we have been in the community for so long in California, because we have been working so closely with our clients and their families, it has allowed us to build quite a network of other professionals and people who can help walk alongside you through all the different walks of life. So after this, you will receive an automated phone call from us asking if you're interested in setting up a Kopenberger appointment. As I mentioned, Kathy's information is also in the chat. So if you need to reach out to her, please jot that information down so that you can do that as well. So thank you again for attending today. We really appreciate it. Again, if anyone has any questions, we'll hang out here for just a couple of minutes, but we will leave the chat up. There is also a survey that is in the chat. If you can just take a few minutes to let us know, was this helpful? Did this capture the information you needed? We really value making sure that these webinars are useful for you. So we do these to make sure that you are educated how you want to be and that the information is interesting. So thank you for taking some time to do that as well. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day and not in the too distant future, a wonderful weekend. And we are here to help whenever you need us. Thank you.